Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents What Makes Time Special by Craig Callender. Narrated by Ray Greenley. Publisher's note: in this audio edition, you will hear references to figures present in the print and ebook formats of the book. I wasted time, and now doth time waste me. William Shakespeare, Richard II. Time is a great teacher, but unfortunately it kills all its pupils. Louis Hector Berlioz, 1856 letter. Some people kill time, but this time is going to kill you. The Clock King, Batman. The Clock King's Crazy Crimes. 1. The Problem of Time. Time is a big, invisible thing that will kill you. For that reason alone, one might be curious about what it is. Yet it is also something that matters to us throughout our daily lives. We represent time from a very early age. These representations arrive and evolve in fits and starts with the development of new abilities and distinctions. While young children, we stumble with serial order recall. Say, remembering the order of a bunch of flashcards. Our concept, yesterday, tends to include all past events, not merely the day before today. We quickly improve. By age 4 or so, we may know that one's birthday is close, and we might embed the start of school in a temporal sequence. Gradually, we abstract away from particular events, birthday parties, holidays, a classmate eating a bug, and employ temporal frameworks such as an ordered timeline into which we locate events. Days, weeks, and years frame events. Soon, we distinguish the history of the world from the history of the self. We decenter from our own temporal perspective and adopt others. Lily can now see that when Ewan lost his first tooth, Isla's birth was in his future. Sooner or later, our temporal representations develop to the point where we can detach from particular perspectives and form a somewhat unified model of time itself. Etched into this proto-theory of time are features central to what makes a human life recognizably human. Unlike with spatial representation, we treat as objective our own current temporal perspective on the world. We possess an almost irresistible temptation to believe that the present moment, right now, as you are listening to this, is the moment that is really happening. Conscious decisions and actions happen in the present, we think. The present is not simply one perspective among many, like upside down and right side up are two spatial perspectives on one world, but we regard it as something objective and common amongst us. This amazing slice of time divides the world in two. We invest the two sides of this division with importantly distinct properties. Past events are fixed, whereas future events are ripe with possibility. These differences are crucial guides in how you live your life. Unlike future headaches, past headaches mean little to you now, for they are over and done. As the Epicureans noted, our prenatal non-existence doesn't concern us in the least, but our future deaths are the source of great angst. Naturally, this tripartite classification of the world into past, present, and future is not itself fixed. Present moments are continually replaced with new ones, updating the tripartite division accordingly. Time seems to flow. These features, that the present is special, that time flows, that the past is fundamentally different from the future, are core components of the model of time we develop. Dub this somewhat rough round the edges common conception, manifest time. Manifest time is not a reflection of time as we directly experience it. It is informed by experience, to be sure, but it is instead time as it arises from a kind of regimented common sense picture of the world, a theory that psychology suggests we come to in late childhood. This conception is no less important for emerging from untutored theory. Quite the opposite. As the philosopher D.H. Mellor writes, it is the time of our lives. Despite its importance, our best science of time suggests that manifest time is more or less rubbish. We don't know the true nature of time, but we do have strong hints from the physical sciences that manifest time may portray a deeply mistaken picture. We arrive at manifest time no differently than we do many of our other models of the world, through a mix of innate endowment, experience, and cognitive inference. Science as an enterprise is a kind of refinement of these inferential techniques, improving on common sense by increasing the data, via experiments, data collection, etc., and the rigor of the inference, via advanced statistics, randomized control trials, meta-analyses, etc. Something funny happens to our understanding of time as these methods are ratcheted up. Time gets deflated to the point where it hardly seems to count as time anymore. Science, and fundamental physics in particular, develops its own image of time, physical time. Whereas manifest time works in ordinary life, physical time is what works in doing physics. If we assume that physical time is our best theory of time, then it turns out that manifest time paints a very misleading image of time. By itself, this is hardly surprising. Science is constantly informing us that our pre-scientific representations of the world are wrong. Regimented common sense tells us that space is Euclidean, when it is really, as an aspect of space-time, non-Euclidean. Folk physics tells us that objects dropped when we're in motion fall straight down, that the sun rotates around the earth, and so on. That a conception of the world succeeds in some aspects of ordinary life doesn't guarantee that it will succeed when exported elsewhere. We ought not expect time to be different. The special problem in the temporal case is that what we're apparently wrong about really matters to us, and to add insult to injury, we have no good story about why we're wrong. If folk physics is wrong about the geometry of space and the trajectories of falling objects, well, we can live with that. We weren't so invested in those beliefs. By contrast, whether something is past, present, or future affects our language, thought, behavior, and even social policy in countless ways. Worse, we lack an understanding of why manifest time arises in us. It's easy to explain why we treat space as Euclidean, falling objects as falling straight, and the sun as rotating around the earth. No mystery there. Space-time curvature's deviation from flatness in our local region of the universe is small, and therefore unlikely to be noticed by creatures like us. A similar story can be told in the case of objects falling, and the Earth's motion explains why we thought the sun orbits around the Earth. In the case of time, we have no such story. We are wrong, and we don't know why. The philosopher Rudolf Carnap reports that this same problem disturbed no less than Albert Einstein. Once, Einstein said that the problem of the now worried him seriously. He explains that the experience of the now means something special for man, something essentially different from the past and the future, but that this important difference does not and cannot occur within physics. That this experience cannot be grasped by science seems to him a matter of painful but inevitable resignation. The worry continues to this day, both in academic journals and the popular press. The physical equations make sense, but they don't satisfy those who ask why we perceive a now, or why time seems to flow the way it does. Science, July 2005. This cold-blooded mathematical formulation doesn't do justice to the experience we all have of being in time. New York Times, July 2013. The choice before us appears bleak. Either physics is right about time, or it isn't. If correct, then it seems we must throw away all that is near and dear to us in our temporal representation, chalking up the now and flow and everything that hangs upon them to an elaborate and unexplained illusion. If it's incorrect about time, then it's incumbent upon us to show where it errs and to devise a more successful theory. Having discovered the lion's share of contemporary physics, Einstein no doubt recognized the enormity of the second task and reconciled himself to the first outcome. Unlike Einstein, Carnap didn't see resignation as inevitable. I remarked that all that occurs objectively can be described in science. On the one hand, the temporal sequence of events is described in physics, and on the other hand, the peculiarities of man's experiences with respect to time, including his different attitude toward past, present, and future, can be described and, in principle, explained in psychology. But Einstein thought that scientific descriptions cannot possibly satisfy our human needs, that there is something essential about the now which is just outside of the realm of science. Unfortunately, Carnap didn't pursue this project by explaining the peculiarities of our experience of time, yet I think it's important to do so. Central parts of the time we live by, the structured time of life, have no counterpart in the fundamental science of our world. We seem to have, to echo the consciousness debate, an explanatory gap between time as we use it in life and as we find it in science. Resignation in the face of this gap is intolerable. Maybe the now and flow are illusions in some sense. But if so, they are remarkably deep and universal ones that demand explanation. Time is connected to far too much: causation, freedom, identity, to leave mysterious. We shouldn't abandon hope for explaining consciousness or free will, nor should we manifest time. Rather than live with Einstein's resignation, I want to explain the now and associated temporal features. Reconciling these two images of time is for me the principal goal of philosophy of time. It's also the goal of this book. 1.1. Manifest time. Watching a gull fly over the local lagoon, I see a continuous shift in position, two wings moving in harmony, one flap after another. As it approaches, it cries out, perhaps as a warning. My impression is of a smooth process. No gaps, no dislocations of order, no flicker. I experience the sound from the cry as happening when the gull's mouth opens. These impressions and others are bound together as simultaneous, part of my subjective present, each set of simultaneous impressions sewn together with the next in what appears to be a continuous temporal sequence. My experience overall roughly matches the external reality. This peaceful scene belies the commotion lurking underneath and the work needed to overcome it. The world is teeming with activity. Objects are blooming and buzzing by, regularly altering their locations and properties while bombarding us with a discordant cacophony of signals. The light reflecting off the gull arrives at my eyes much faster than its cry does to my ears. Tonight is humid, so sound is especially slow. Some of the gull is in shadow, other parts illuminated. While admiring the gull, I also see a child running, hear the dog barking, feel the sand's texture. Despite the assault from all sides by a chaotic mix of information, we are able to form mental representations of the temporal sequence of events that, especially for those events that matter to us, more or less matches the objective temporal sequence of events. We hear the gull's cry when we see its mouth open, notwithstanding the signal discrepancies. As we'll see in section 1.1.1, we get it wrong to get it right. Our brain and perceptual system fix the information so that properties of the same event are experienced together. Getting the timing approximately right is only the beginning of our relationship with time. We also experience duration. how long events last. Here too we can distinguish between the objective temporal properties and our experiences of them. The film Pan's Labyrinth may have seemed to you an eternity, but for me it flew by. Perhaps you're not a fan of dark fantasies, or maybe you had a hard day and weren't very alert. Science tells us that the subjective sense of duration depends on an indefinitely long suite of variables, including wakefulness, interest, mood, caffeine intake, and much more. We therefore disagree about how long the film seemed. But seemed is the key word here, for when presented with the evidence, we do not disagree that objectively the film took 112 minutes, that in that interval the Earth rotated approximately 7.8% of its daily rotation, and so on. Similarly, time may have frozen for me during a car accident, but I do not expect it to have done so for those safely at home. We distinguish between subjective and objective duration. The overall pattern of covariations make plausible the idea that some aspects of our experience are due to us, and some due to the outside world. Though we remark on the discrepancies when watching a film, what's again interesting is that the experience of duration more or less matches the objective duration for most macroscopic, observable, events. If I ask you to match tones that are fairly different in duration, odds are that you won't make many mistakes. For longer durations, some studies suggest that, minus temporal cues, each objective hour subjectively is judged on average to be 1.12 hours. We employ many biological clocks, and some of them are quite good at estimating durations of salient macroscopic events. We make mistakes judging durations at the level of milliseconds, but even here we tend to be within 10% of the objective duration. Temporal experience, in the aforementioned respects, more or less gets time right. Or, slightly more accurately, often it gets the duration and objective temporal sequence of events approximately right when those events are macroscopic and salient to us. These experiences, when coupled with some of our other abilities, crucially memory, allow us to develop a kind of rough and ready map or timeline of events in time. This map provides information about the temporal sequence of events, what events come before other ones, and also the duration of events, how long they last. Manifest time contains much more than a map or temporal order and duration, and not all of it coincides with what is directly experienced. That's the reason why I echo the phrase manifest image from the philosopher Wilfrid Sellars, for the manifest image is a kind of regimented common-sense picture of the world, not what is directly experienced. Separating our actual experience from what we cognitively infer is tricky. For now, I want to put experience to the side and instead get our theory or proto-theory of manifest time out in the open. Some of these features are not based on experience in any normal sense of the word. Later, when we dig deeper into manifest time, we'll try to determine which of its aspects, if any, are supported by conscious phenomenology. As, say, seeing red supports the existence of redness. Conflict with common sense is forgivable, and often what makes science exciting. But conflict with experience is unacceptable. The picture of time we inherit from childhood is a vast, complicated tapestry, one strewn with confusing, vague, and perhaps even inconsistent threads. The resulting model of time has dozens of aspects to it. It is, I claim, ordered, metrical, events have durations, flowing, global, one-dimensional, shared, continuous, absolute, productive, and much more. Tackling all of these properties would make our investigation unwieldy. As a result, although I will stray slightly here and there, I want to narrow our focus to the temporal counterparts of what psychologists of spatial representation call egocentric or perspectival or internal representations. In the case of space, There are spatial frameworks in which one locates objects by reference to one's own spatial location, or here. Examples are claims such as, the fork is on the right, and the car is in the front. Non-perspectival, or allocentric spatial frameworks, by contrast, locate entities independently of any particular perspective. For example, Kansas City is between San Diego and Providence. The difference is easy to see. Spin around and the fork is on your left and the car behind you. But Kansas City is still between those same two cities. Psychologists, linguists, and philosophers also make the temporal version of this distinction. Egocentric temporal frameworks are those that locate events by reference to one's current temporal location. For example, Socrates' death is past, and the first mile-high building is future. McTaggart famously points out that we regard events as arranged in a so-called A series, where events move from the past to the present and to the future. Crucially, this is done with respect to the distinguished now just mentioned, for the now is what defines past, present, and future. In linguistics and cognitive science, the A series is referred to as deictic time. This is an attribution to time based on a temporal reference point. So long as that point coincides with McTaggart's now, typically the time of utterance, then the two are the same. Philosophers and linguists will also refer to such attributions as tensed. Allocentric temporal frameworks, by contrast, locate events without reference to one's current temporal location, or a now. The relations before and after serve this function. Calendars and history accomplish this, as do clocks. McTaggart called the series of events running from earlier to later the B series, or as psychologists may call it, sequence time. These types of temporal attributions are tenseless. One way to notice the difference between egocentric and allocentric temporal representation is to appreciate that it's always true that Socrates drank hemlock before he died, no matter when I claim this. Yet that Socrates will in the future drink hemlock is not true if uttered now. The truth of a remark about the A series varies with the changing now, unlike the truth of a remark about the B series. March 1968 is later than December 1967, no matter where the now is. The later-than relation obtains independently of one's current temporal location. The key to understanding the B series is to note that it is devoid of any deictic center. Therefore, minus a point anchoring the now, there is no past and future in this series, only before and after. Developmentally, there is some reason to think that we adopt egocentric temporal representations by about the age of 4 or 5. Much is unknown, and interpreting experiments is a delicate task. However, I suspect that temporal decentering is crucial to the development of the idea that all events are unified in an A series. Taking our cue again from space, where more work has been done in developmental psychology, spatial decentering is the ability to adapt a spatial frame on an object from a location that isn't where the subject is located. Although the fork is on my left, I can take your perspective and see that it's on your left. When I can understand that these are all perspectives on the same spatial map, then I have achieved spatial decentering. Similarly, temporal decentering is the ability to adopt a temporal frame on a time that isn't the time when the subject is located. Without it, it's hard to see how we could understand the idea of the past, present, and future updating itself and flowing by. A child may understand that breakfast happened in the past and dinner will happen in the future. But when do they learn to decenter? When do they also appreciate that today's breakfast is to the future of yesterday's dinner? When can they lift their now and move it along a temporal sequence? In probably the first work on temporal decentering, Cromer told children a story of a child who climbs a ladder up to a slide and then slides down, hitting the bottom a bit too hard. Illustrated in a series of pictures arranged from left to right in accord with the later than relation, children were asked to point to the card representing a child who may say, "I will go down the slide." Cromer found that by age 4 or 5, children could answer correctly. He interpreted the task as displaying mastery of decentering. To be successful at the task, after all, children had to place the now at a different time than their own. Spatial decentering is prompted by the most ordinary of active perceptions, just turning one's head. But to learn to temporally decenter, it seems memory of the self in past times is crucial. Unless one can recall that what is now past once was present, one will have little experience supporting decentering. The adult conception of time is one in which we have detached temporal properties from particular events and is fully decentered. We refer to moments of time themselves without reference to any particular event, and we can easily slide the tripartite division of the world into past, present, and future up and down a unified timeline. Although this division, past, present, future, is an egocentric as opposed to allocentric representation, don't let the terms confuse. Manifest time treats these distinctions as objective, not egocentric. That is a key difference between spatial and temporal representation. As we navigate through life, we take these distinctions to be basic features of time and invest great importance in them. Although manifest time marks many distinctions besides what I'm calling the egocentric, in what follows we'll focus on the now, the flow, and the past-future asymmetry. Dozens of additional features could be selected for study. I concentrate on these three because they play a central role in the way we live our lives, are more or less special to time, and yet seem to conflict with physical time. 1.1.1 Now. Inspirational t-shirt messages exhort us to live in the now. Tattoo designs and Japanese characters commonly proclaim the same insight. Self-help guides promise 10-step guides to living in the moment. And today, we are told, is Pooh's favorite day. While one can appreciate the advice not to dwell upon events outside one's control, there is a sense in which these cliched exhortations are annoying, not just for being cliches, because taken literally, we have no choice but to live in the present. That is when all the living, conscious actions, decisions, seems to happen. Events in our lives don't seem like they're simply strewn along a four-dimensional manifold. We think that there is a further fact of the matter about when they happen. When we conceptualize time and our lives, we regard one set of events as lit up, as especially vivid or happening or real. In a sense, you are stuck in the now, and to be told to stay there seems unnecessary. The nature of the psychological present has been controversial in psychology and philosophy for well past a century. Obviously, we process temporal information over many timescales. To localize sounds, one needs to be able to discriminate temporal intervals as short as 600 microseconds, the time it takes for sound to travel the distance from one ear to the other. Longer periods, in the tens to hundreds of milliseconds range, are needed for motion detection, speech recognition, motor coordination, multisensory integration, and music perception. Predicting events, such as a skateboarder darting across your path, might be in the range of a second or so. Circadian rhythm tracks information through a day. The mechanisms subserving these processes typically differ. Circadian rhythm occurs due to a complicated protein translation-transcription feedback loop. Sound localization occurs thanks to axonal delay lines, and yet neither is the mechanism necessary for the other processes listed. Amidst all these processes, how do we determine what part is the subjective present and what isn't? Discussion of this question has been confused for a long time. People take their present perceptual experiences to include non-instantaneous temporal properties such as succession and duration. Watching the second hand on a clock just now It seems to be in motion. Yet,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?